Chapter 29, Section 3. African Americans were going to continue to fight for equal rights. The Civil War was over in 1865, but the fight continued. And in the 1950s, the 1960s, this movement for civil rights is going to come to the forefront of society. Let's start by talking about what happens in some schools. Back in 1896, you had the Supreme Court case, Plessy versus Ferguson. This is the case that established the idea that separate but equal is legal. It's okay. The NAACP is going to fight against this for decades. The NAACP is the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. They do show some progress, opening up some universities to African American students by showing how inferior some of these black schools were. But the courts continued to uphold segregation. In 1952, you're going to have a new Supreme Court case, Brown versus Board of Education. This is going to be the legal challenge to segregation in public schools. Linda Brown is a plaintiff here. This is going to be in Topeka, Kansas. African American students in Topeka, Kansas, they had to go a long distance, cross some very dangerous railroad tracks to get to school. When close to their homes, there was a school, but it was a white school. And so there's going to be a lawsuit filed on Linda Brown's behalf. The NAACP lawyer that's going to argue for Linda Brown is Thurgood Marshall. And the strategy he's going to use, he says, segregation lowers a student's self-worth. You know, you have a perfectly fine school there, and you tell these children they can't go to that school. They need to go way over there to a school that's not nearly as nice. Long walk, dangerous tracks. That child's going to grow up thinking, oh, we're not good enough for that school. Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, Earl Warren, is going to issue the opinion that racial segregation in public schools is illegal. Now, you're going to have many that praise this decision. But you're going to have some that are very skeptical. Some are, they say there's a difference between what the law says and reality, and some of the white leaders aren't going to want to open up their school. Some schools moved relatively quickly to end segregation. Schools in the South, on the other hand, resisted. In 1955, the Supreme Court even has to issue orders telling schools, hurry up. It's been a few years now. You need to hurry up and desegregate. But by the time you get to the 1956-57 school year, most Southern schools were still segregated. This brings us to Little Rock, Arkansas. The plan was to desegregate in Little Rock, Arkansas in September of 57. All white Central High School is going to admit 9 African American students. The governor of Arkansas, Orval Faubus, refuses to cooperate with this plan. And he's going to not let the Little Rock Nine, as they were known, come to school. He sent the National Guard to surround the school, saying he wanted to protect the school from armed protesters, and so he needed to, send in the National Guard. When in reality, the Little Rock Nine were prevented from entering the school. For 3 weeks, they can't enter school until finally the courts step in and the courts order the removal of the troops. You can't use a National Guard like that. The Little Rock Nine are going to try to enter school again, but this time there is a white mob that turns violent that prevents them from going to school. Eisenhower will finally send in 1,000 federal troops. I mean, they'll even go pick up these students at their homes, and they can finally enter school. Faubus continued to look for ways to resist desegregation. The school year of 58-59, Faubus ordered the Little Rock public school system shut down. And then he helped set up private schools for the whites. But that also meant that the poor, as well as minorities, had no school. In 1959, the courts ordered that the schools have to be reopened. You can't shut down all the public schools. And desegregation begins to slowly occur. Let's take a look with segregation issues with the transportation system. The NAACP wanted to challenge the practice of African Americans having to sit in the back of the bus. But they needed a chance to challenge this. December 1st, 1955, Rosa Parks is going to give the NAACP its opportunity to challenge it. Rosa Parks is going to, she's working all day, she's tired, she gets on the bus, she sits down, and then a white person gets on the bus and she's told to move back. And she doesn't. She refuses. She's not, belligerent about it. She just says no. In turn, she is arrested. You're going to end up with a boycott of the Montgomery bus system put into place here. 50,000 African Americans in Montgomery refused to use the bus system. They walked, they arranged carpools, but they didn't use the buses. This will catch attention. You lose 50,000 customers, that's going to hurt. This is going to be organized by the Montgomery Improvement Association. The Montgomery Improvement Association is going to choose a 26-year-old Baptist minister as its spokesperson, Martin Luther King Jr. He was energetic, he was a moving speaker, he could inspire large audiences. This boycott is going to drag on for months. Whites tried to end the boycott through various means. King's house is bombed, firebomb thrown onto his front porch at his home. Luckily, they were in the back of the home, so they weren't injured. They fired workers, like Rosa Parks lost her job. All the while, King urged the use of nonviolence. Don't respond to violence with more violence. That's what the whites wanted. They wanted to say, look, see how they're revolting, they're rebelling, and they're being violent. You'd play right into their hands. Finally, in November of '56, the Supreme Court declares the bus segregation laws, unconstitutional. And by the end of the year, the buses are desegregated. And the civil rights movement has a new leader, Martin Luther King Jr. There's going to be some other huge blows to racial discrimination. Congress is going to pass its first civil rights laws since Reconstruction. They passed the Civil Rights Act of 1957, which made it a federal crime to prevent qualified persons from voting. And they set up a federal Civil Rights Commission to investigate any violations of the law. They put this in federal hands. The southern states couldn't be trusted to actually carry through with this. 1960, you're going to have a follow-up law helping protect voter rights.